Okay, Graham. So you started with Tim Forster when you were 15, baptism of cold baths and all that. So you were born in 1949. Were you born into like a horse racing family?
No, I was born in Wales, Somerset, and funny enough, I've got a lovely big painting, which mother died last year, of the square in Wales and the cathedral in the background. And there's the Red Lion, and I said that's Mum's side. They own the cafe. I was born there, but my uncle Jimmy, he did pony racing. He was a great friend of Herbert Payne. Now, Richard Pitman wrote in detail when I was an amateur. I had one season as an amateur because I said, well, Dad couldn't afford it, and because I had no wages, you know, with Forster, I don't break the rules. If I give you 1 penny for carrying that bucket over there, that makes you professional, and I'll be breaking the rules. So no wages.
Well, hang on. So when you started working there, you didn't get paid?
Not a thing. And Forster, and there were so many Lord Fauntleroy's sons or rich people, assistants and lads, that there was almost an amateur lads war on there, and no wages. So Dad couldn't afford it, obviously, and I had my keep in the hostel, but no wages. From then on, I was, as I said, that was the first year. I had 80 rides, and Richard Pittman, my best friend, wrote it that I had 5 for Forster. 3 were Mrs. Enrique's on a broken down horse who put me in racing, and apparently, according to my uncle who worked for her, not this Uncle Jimmy that got me into it, he was Uncle Jim Wickham and Jimmy Thorner. He said, she asked, is Graham going to ride that? Then Ron Viber got hurt in the first, and then another time I did. So in theory, he gave me 5 rides out of 80, and at my finishing do at the Cavalry Club in London, which would be suit Forster, with all the owners when I finished riding, he said, I know Graham was annoyed with me. He said, but I was very clever. I let him make all his mistakes on other people's horses. Then I grabbed him. But as I said, that's how the times were those days. They're so different, and it didn't matter. But I wrote more than once that Herbie Payne from Wales in Somerset got me going.
So could you ride before you got, so where did you learn to ride?
Well, this Uncle Jimmy was into pony racing, my dad's brother, and he treated me like a son. I got at least 4 cousins. One of them has been down here to Nigel's Open Days, who's very interested in racing, Paul Thorner. He quickly got me into ponies, and then he went to Jim Canner's with me. I mean, and his son stayed at home doing the milking, and he encouraged me. And then everyone was quite shocked when you got out of 14-2, age 15. You then you're not junior show jumping anymore. And of course, we met Stroller, Marion Mould. David Mould married her. Stroller was the pony of Stroller's here today. He won every time. So that was funny how life goes on, that Marion marries David Mould, a friend, and to me, one of the best jockeys ever. That got me going. But then, aren't you going to go on in the seniors? No, I always imagined and wanted to be a jockey. You know, when you watch racing, you went out and saddled up your pony and galloped flat out over the poles in the afternoon. So that was the start.
So your first winner was Longway at Newton Abbot in 1966. How many rides would you have had before you had your first winner?
Only probably about 20, I would imagine. And again, that was Mr. G. Thorner. Had three winners for West Country. Longway was Herbie Payne. Misquote, who went on and won the Imperial Hurdle, not with me on it, for Lawrence Potter. And then the third one was Alberto for Sid Hoddinott, whose sister was married to Richard Barber. So three West Country winners to start with. And then I turned after a year because Dad couldn't afford it, you know, turned professional. Very lucky because they just brought out a series of boys races, and although Tim Forster, I said, he didn't do anything for me. He wasn't that sort of person. Whereas other trainers have got horse and that. His name did. It was Tim Forster's Conditional, and there was Richard Dennard, Caslett, Ali Blandford, Fruit Warwin, Clive Bailey, Toby Borden, and myself clogged up the conditional jockeys. And if there was a conditional jockeys championship, I think I was 10th or somewhere as a conditional. I would have been champion conditional, but I was lucky in that that got me going. The other thing that get me going, I know for a fact Jeremy Hindley was assistant trainer, and for some reason Toby Borden had a horse for Herbie Payne, and he said, look Graham, they're saying, you know, you ride mine, and one or two are saying, you know, why don't Forster use him? And I said, that's it, I'm going to Toby, because he gave a lot of boys a chance. You know, as you know, Bob Champion, Clive Bailey, Owen McNally was a stable jockey, and I was going there, and I told Jeremy Hindley, and there was a 13-year-old roughed off for at least 2 weeks called Sandy Sadler, owned by a very good friend of mine, Gordon Luggan owner, and Frisky Briscoe, who was his secretary, Warwin's secretary, and the national trainer secretary, godparent to my kids. They owned a bit. Oh, run it in there's a boys selling chase at Plumpton. Rode it, Sankey, Mr. Sankey claimed it, that owned Ross Hythe, with Ryan Price that won the sweeps a couple of times, went to Alan Orton. Alan Orton said, I want this boy to ride it. He said, I don't know him, no. Walked in the ring, nearly said, I don't know who you are, but you've got to ride another selling chase. It won. Oh, he's all right. Won at Kempton in a boys race for him, it won. Landed up riding all of Alan Orton's, and that season he offered me a retainer. He said, you're not riding all of Forster's, but I guess I was sort of happy where I was, and he had some horses, so I stayed where I was.
So was most of the business of booking you for rides done at the races? Because I can't imagine then so that Tim Forster would have been happy if somebody rang up and said, can I speak to Graham?
Well, no, in those days they rang you, and your wife, Caroline, drove me a lot, but you had, I think, a new thing come in. You had an answer machine, which was new, brand new. You could leave a message. That was great. You know, no mobile phone. So, no, you made your own arrangements. What was a bit difficult was the governor, as I call him, the governor, he wasn't going to put himself out, and I had to do juggling the owners. Can you ride that Saturday, Graham? No, I think I'm going there, and I had to keep that owner happy, or that trainer happy, because Forster wouldn't let me know. I said to him one day, Governor, Mr. Winter, I thought he won't mess Fred Winter, right? I rode quite a bit. I rode Midnight Court for Mr. Winter 2 weeks before he won the Gold Cup. And I said, Mr. Winter wants to know, am I going to Sandown? He said, I don't know. I pay a retainer. It's my privilege to fuck you about. And that was the governor.
Right, we'll talk about him a bit more in a minute. You were affectionately known as Whanger. Is that correct?
Well,
and if so, who christened you that and why?
Well, Jonathan Powell did that. I said, well, I wanged it of you. So he started calling me the Whanger. Yeah, my stick was that long. But Forster had, his idea was, he told me, but we never had a chat. We had a conversation. We never had a warm chat. But he would let things out now and then. I'd like to buy these lovely big horses, and when, you know, hurdle racing should be abandoned. So I don't know what he thought about bumper horses. And go on. I never missed a novice chase on a great big boat that would take 4 years to find out he was any good or useless. And he sorts of men from the boys in the mud. He loved a 3-mile chase in the mud. So unless you got stuck into him, they didn't know you were on their back. Totally different type of horse around these days, you know. So I think, yeah, I was hard on horses, but Alistair Down, in one of the last articles he wrote, he said, yeah, I'd have a permanent holiday. I'd have a permanent job in Thompson's Holiday if I was riding now. Number one, I'd like to think I'd adapt. But yeah, I was hard on horses. Richard Pittman said the two hardest people he ever knew was Graham Thorner and Lester Piggott. But as Alistair wrote, they won year after year. I firmly believe if a horse is still doing it, still get into him. I believe the damage is done when you hit a horse when he's gone, when there's no more to give, which I never did that. I can remember twice thinking I was a bit too hard on those horses, and one come out and won 11 points for Tucky Sumner, who Mr. Sumner owned it, in the next season. So I couldn't have done him too much damage.
Now, you're a professional jockey for 15 years, and you stuck with Tim Forster for all that time, but he wouldn't talk to you as an equal.
I think it was just that old Eton Sanders, but he talking to people say, oh, he was singing your praises. Graham wins me 25 races a year that no one else would, and he said, oh, when he's upsized 2 or 3, I know he'll win. Well, he said that in my goodbye in his goodbye speech at the Cavalry Club. He said it was very nice to know that when a horse was upside 2 or 3 out, you know Graham would outride someone. But he never said it to me once. There was John Thorne, Barber, and John Royle at Doncaster Sales a few years later, and he said, see this man here, he win me 25, and I said, yeah, and you never said that to me once, Governor. And he didn't, he never said it to me, but again, that old-fashioned, he thought it and said it, but he wouldn't say it to me.
Was it a different relationship when you retired and you weren't his employee anymore?
Well, no, I was very fond of him, you know, like, he was in, I bought a place in the next village. I bought a place in Letcombe Regis where Lester was born and bred, which we had conversations with Lester often about that. No, I respected him. You know, as I said, I'm a bit critical in several books, but that's my privilege, because, and every word is true. But if anyone else criticism, I would say, you better shut up. You're talking about my governor. You know, that's what I felt about him. I mean, now how I am now, where I'm in, you know, the gallops are 4 miles away and I'm in the first at Plumpton with no motorways, wetting myself that I'm not going to get there. Now I'd say, Governor, I'm in the first at Plumpton, I'll come up in the Land Rover with you. But at the time, you just took it out. That's how it was in those days. You know, things have changed.
Okay, you retired after 650-ish winners.
Yeah.
In 1979. So why did you decide it was time to turn it in?
Well, to be honest, what happened was I'm a celiac, and I didn't know it. But the day I gave up, I was 8 stone 2, and someone sent me a photograph about a year ago, signing it, and I'm literally, well, I'm not much better now, but I think I'm fat compared to what I was. I was skin and bone, and the shirt was out here. You know, well, as you know, if they don't know, see it, you eat your food and it just goes straight through you. And felt as weak as a kitten, never missed a novice chase. I was totally down. Plus, he wasn't very good. He should have had you in and said, look, what's up? He didn't do that sort of thing. And never missing a novice chase. I was beginning to probably in all reality, probably losing my nerve a bit, probably. But what was interesting was, if I had a ride for someone else, novice chase, whatever, totally relaxed, fine. When I rode for him, I wasn't at ease. So one day, I said something, and Jenny Pittman said, you can ride all mine. And I rode Corbier for her the day I gave up. Didn't tell anyone, but I'm going to give up, just gave up overnight. And I went over to see him. I think racing was off or something, and it was Frosty. And very unusually, I didn't ride out for him 6 days a week, which I did. Said, Governor, I want to have a chat. I said, look, I went over to say, I can't ride for anymore. I'm going to ride for Jenny Pitt. And he said, no then. My owner said you look dreadful. Are you ill? I said, well, I'm not feeling great. But I said, he said, I think you've lost your nerve. So I said, okay, Governor. I thought about it, and I was so down. I thought, well, I'll give up. Fine. Next week, next month, whatever. But he's beginning to jot me off a few. And you wrote everything for him. Good, bad or ugly, you wrote everything. And I said, no, I'll do it Saturday, which I did. Did it overnight. That's why I gave up, because I was, in theory, dying. Goes in the papers, and Fred Winter rang up and said, Graham, you mustn't give up. Come and see me. Have a rest. He rang up the next day when he read it. But I wouldn't regret it. Whenever I made a decision, I never looked back, and that was it. But that's the reason why I didn't carry on.